Hey, good morning, Teresa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Another great Friday. I'm excited for this one because I'm going to learn a lot that I could probably take and go educate my wife on. And what we'll be talking about for the viewers out there is hormones, hormone replacement therapy, or why this topic is so important, relevant, why women think about it. You're a woman in age where you could probably use hormone replacement therapy or not. I don't know if you ever tried it, but I always hear a lot of
Currently
women talking
on,
about it.
currently on.
Early on. Well, I've coached a lot of women that do bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, and I just generally want you to explain what happens with hormone loss. As women go through perimenopause to menopause to postmenopause, why would they want to consider doing replacement therapy with hormones, bioidentical or whatnot? I don't know the differences really. This is not my forte, so I'm here to learn from you and just ask you some questions about it. So,
Yeah.
floor is all yours, Teresa. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I am a woman in my 50s, have been on in menopause for a long time because it was artificially introduced. Just a little personal note, I had a miscarriage in my 40s and I didn't stop bleeding. I just kept, so they had to do a procedure where it artificially induced a lack of menses, which then affected my hormones. So I haven't actually had a cycle for years, but then we were just kind of watching my numbers, my actual hormone numbers to see where I was. And I suffered. Like, it was not easy. And I part of my training was that I was taught that estrogen replacement therapy or bioidentical hormone replacement therapy was dangerous, that it would cause breast cancer. And so I was like, oh, heck no, I'm not doing that. And then a couple years ago, it was actually probably 2 years ago, someone, I was listening to a lecture, a continuing education thing that I was at, and they totally debunked the whole thing. They're like, that article, that study that they did, they totally misconstrued the data. They misconstrued and misrepresented the results. It really put a lot of fear, and women have been suffering because of it, because they are so unwilling to go ahead and move in that direction. And I was a little afraid, I'll be honest. So I was like, okay, I held on to this belief for such a long time that it was so dangerous for me. But the more I sat with it and the more I thought about it and I did some more research, I thought, why, if there is the ability to replace my hormones in a natural way, in a way that mimics what I used to do on my own, why would I suffer with the symptoms that I did? Because I was hot flashes and night sweats and difficulty losing weight and things like that. Those are the big things that I had. Now, when I was going through menopause, I managed a lot of those symptoms with um, plant-based or phytoestrogens. So things like wild yam, dong quai, black cohosh, those are like plant-based things. Wild yam is a really good one. It's a plant-based um, component, uh, substance that really looks a lot like our hormones. So I used that and it worked amazing. It was amazing for managing the symptoms. But I thought, okay, so why would I suffer like this? Because estrogen, so what happens, to answer your question, that what happens with hormone loss as we age, we make hormones so that as women, so that we can have babies. It's really the way it goes. Like, it's so that we can maintain the human species, right? There's one hormone that raises in the body, that builds up the lining of the uterus, and that's what we shed then when we have our cycle. There's another hormone that causes the eggs in our ovaries that we're born with to release. And when those are released, that's what stimulates the release of and the shedding of the lining. So follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Follicle stimulating being the one that releases the egg, and that right before our period. And then luteinizing hormone is the one that causes the buildup of the uterine lining. And it's also that we can become pregnant as we get older. And those are controlled by estrogen and progesterone. So as we get older, our estrogen production just begins to naturally decline. And so does progesterone. And then, we still have teeny tiny amounts, and our ovaries take over estrogen production, but they don't do as good of a job as our ovaries because that's what they're designed to do. So we do have some of that. But for women like me who lived in chronic stress because I worked in an intensive care unit and the emergency department, and I was a single mom with 5 kids, like my adrenals were they were tired. So they already had enough work to do that they weren't able to keep up with the progesterone production then. So I thought, okay, what do I do here? The other thing that happens, like we need estrogen and this is where osteopenia, like the thinning of the bones and osteoporosis becomes an issue because estrogen is very protective of our bones. It helps us to hold on to our bones. It's where, we also start to have sarcopenia where we lose muscles. That's why for women who are in peri to postmenopausal, like, weight training is really important because we lose muscle mass. Our skin loses the elasticity. That's why we start to look older and have wrinkles and things like that. It's also very heart protective. That's why if women are going to have a heart attack, it's not going to be in their 30s. It's going to be, as they age. If there's other things that go on, cardiovascular disease is an inflammatory disease. But if you got other stuff going on and you don't have the protection that estrogen allows for the elasticity of the blood vessels, then that can be an issue too. And then it just helps us to think like we start to feel like having a senior moment. We laugh and that we call it that, but that's really like part of it is that estrogen protects us, protects our brain so that we are able to think clearly and we, stay sharp and alert and, don't have the cognitive decline. So estrogen can be very helpful. And you don't, like it's something that you really miss when it goes away. You didn't realize like estrogen, you were my best friend.
It's definitely a team effort when it comes to hormones, and that's a wonderful explanation. It kind of gives me a lot more perspective on just what goes on physiologically in a woman, because I see that so many women that I've coached, over half of them are on some type of hormone replacement therapy, and I always am so intrigued by why. And it seems like it's because of the anti-aging aspect of it, maybe. I don't know. I don't really understand what the purpose is, because
Or
for
the
me,
emotional lability too. I forgot to mention that it really helps us to manage our emotions instead of feeling like we're like, "Oh," that feeling that we got when we were PMSing. It kind of like you don't want to be that way in menopause either. So
so this is like an artificial, not even though it's considered natural, this is like an artificial, because I think of like, God designed us in a way to go beyond reproductive years, but how did he design our bodies? Obviously, he didn't design our atmosphere and our environment to be so stressful and chaotic, because I imagine that has a
an
massive impact.
enormous amount of impact. Yeah. I don't think women experience menopausal symptoms like like we do now. I don't think they experience them this way, in the last hundreds of years ago. I think this has just been the decline in our environment, the things that we get exposed to, the toxic air, water, food, all the things that we get exposed to, and like we live in the busiest society ever. Other countries, maybe not. You never hear about European women talking about menopausal symptoms. At least I haven't. A lot of when I visit the villages in nice, like I'm thinking, my husband's from Italy. Like they just they sit around and they have a glass of wine and they talk with their friends and they enjoy life and they take naps in the middle of the day and they do all kinds of, life isn't like go, 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 go all the time. And so it really affects them. They don't notice it as much, so I don't hear them complaining about a lot of the same things because I don't think that the world that we live in is not the same as it was. And the speed at which we live life was not the same 100 years ago.
100% correct. And we are in this kind of rushing, go, go, go,
Called
always
Russian woman syndrome.
rushing woman syndrome, very real thing. And, when you think of the role of the woman, she's a wife, a mother, maybe she's working at a corporate office somewhere, and there's all these demands pulling at her from several different ways. And she's got to somehow manage and balance this in her mind, all the while taking on the changes as she ages. So that leads me to my next question. And I'll just throw this stat out there real quickly that the CDC says on average, women go into menopause at age 52, But I know from just coaching with several women, and you know this probably too, is that we're seeing a much younger age that
Younger and younger and
we're
younger.
into, and I want to talk about perimenopause because this is a very fascinating to me transition for women in their 30s that are experiencing symptoms that they shouldn't be, at
Mhm.
least into the mid late 40s,
Mhm.
as it relates to, you know, the hormone loss aspect. But talk about the symptoms and the struggles of perimenopause and why so many women struggle finding adequate help to combat this transition.
Yeah, the reason this is one of the things that I think about too, because I have been seeing a lot of women, who are having perimenopausal symptoms at a really young age. And part of it, I believe, is due to the fact that women are getting their period at a younger age. So, this beginning of menstrual cycle used to be about 12. I'm sorry, it used to be, yeah, about 12 years old. Now we see girls getting their periods as early as 9. That's so
No
young.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so young. You know, so in say in Jewish thought, you have the bat mitzvah, the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah as a rite of passage into adulthood. That's around the age that a woman should be, guys, the boys' voices change and the women, the
So this
girls
is
get
like
their
13,
periods.
14-ish.
13, 14. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it's the same because it's the rite of passage. So like we wouldn't think about doing that rite of passage at such a young age, but it's truly happening. Part of it is the endocrine disruptors that are in um, the water bottles, drinking water, things like that, the plasticizers that they put in, like microwaving vegetables in a plastic bag for real, drinking out of styrofoam, drinking out of a plastic water bottle, even if it's BPA. BPA is only one kind of many, many plastics. Uh, eating meat that are that it has received injections of hormones, right? Um, those are all things that affect us, and that's why girls are getting their period at such a young age. So you get your period at a young age, it means your hormones are changing in a direction that they didn't. So now perimenopause, or the change of the cycle, so that you then start to look like you're going into menopause, it's at a younger age. So your periods start to get lighter, or they may be heavier. They're not every 28 days. Maybe they're every 22 days, or maybe they're every 35 days. You feel like you're having your own personal summer, those hot flashes where you're like, I mean, no guy has ever experienced this. It feels like this warmth that just like comes from the belly, and you're like, all of a sudden your face is bright red and you're perspiring. You're like, what in the world just hit me? Um, maybe you feel like you wake up in the middle of the night and you're drenched. You throw off the covers and you're like, oh my gosh, it's just like, I'm so hot. Your moods, like we talked about before, just having that emotional roller coaster where your husband looks at you cross-eyed and you're like, you either like break down in tears or you're like ready to chew his face off, um, trouble getting to sleep, trouble staying asleep, changes that happen, vaginally, dryness, intercourse becomes painful because we don't, things aren't as moist and we're not lubricated, or maybe we don't even care about it at all. We don't want to have sex because who cares? And then, like I said, the senior moments that we used to have, the cognitive decline, where things, you're like word searching, trying to figure out, what was I trying to say? Whose name was that? I know I was supposed to tell my husband something when he's going out to the store for me. I can't remember. Those are all real, and they're disruptive. Like, they disrupt our lives. We feel like something is just terrible happening to us. And so it's really can be a very disconcerting if we don't know how to manage it. And if we feel like we're the only one going through it. Sister, you're not. You're not the only one. Other people are feeling it. Most people just don't talk about it.
So what can women do? That's a really good explanation there, and especially with hitting with the symptoms, because I'm sure a lot of females in their 30s and 40s, probably even younger, experience a lot of those symptoms just
Yeah.
from the, amount of stress that they experience. But what are some key takeaways that if a woman's in her 40s going into her 50s, or they're already in their 40s and 50s, how can they, what are some natural ways that you would suggest that they could balance this out, some testing methodologies that they can do to remain aware and correct it?
If you really want to know where your hormones are and what your cycles look like, my very, very, very favorite test is called a Dutch. You collect urine, you collect saliva. I like the one that also shows the cortisol levels, because those are really helpful to see too, because that's a representation of the stress that we're under and what our adrenals are, our adrenal glands are doing. So I like the Dutch test a lot. When we take regular blood tests, so part of the caveat with a blood test is, remember, we've talked about cell inflammation. If our cells are inflamed and we have hormone receptors, our messages may be in the bloodstream, but they're not getting into the cell. So these numbers don't always reflect what is actually happening or how well our cells are responding. So it's a good measurement. We can still track them. We can still trend them, but it's not always accurate just with blood alone. The urine and the saliva is a really good way to track our hormones, because they just show up there in a different way. So that's my favorite test.
And
One of
just
the very,
what you're saying with the blood measurement. So this is for, like, say, a woman who is still experiencing a lot of symptoms and she's trying to get bioidentical hormone replacement therapy or some sort of treatment, and they're doing the blood measurements in the serum, and she still feels like crap and it's not working. This means that she has potential inflammation at the level of the cell that these
correct.
cells are not getting in.
Yeah, correct. So that happens a lot. I have someone I'm working with right now that we did her blood levels. We still do track those, but we also compared those to a Dutch.
Okay.
And this particular person chose not to do the bioidentical. We're doing things like I mentioned, wild yam, dong quai, black cohosh, vitex, it's also called chaseberry. Amazing, amazing. Depending on where you are, sometimes the brassicas, so not cauliflower, broccoli sprouts contain DIM. They can help to regulate things a little bit. One of the easiest things you could do without taking, believe it or not, without taking an actual supplement, is to do something called seed cycling. So seed cycling is where you take, just like it sounds, you take seeds at certain times during the cycle to support estrogen or support progesterone. So and you can start this at any time, and it actually helps to regulate. So days 1 through 14, eat a tablespoon of raw organic pumpkin and flax seeds. It helps to cool off estrogen, so estrogen doesn't go too high. Because sometimes as things are changing and fluctuating, it's not that we don't have enough, and we have too much. Sometimes that happens too, especially with like some of the endocrine disruptors that we talked about.
Now,
And
real
then
quick with the brand, because there's only a very specific brand that I trust to do seed oils this way.
this is not a seed oil. This is actual seeds that
Okay.
like granola, like trail mix,
Okay.
not seed oils. You're doing actual like seeds, raw, organic. So they're not rancid, and they haven't been roasted. So the oil hasn't changed inside of them. Seed oils. I'm sorry, actual seeds, the actual crunchy like trail mix. So again, day 1 through 14, it's 1 tablespoon each of raw organic pumpkin and flax seeds. That cools off estrogen. Then days 15 through 28, you would do a tablespoon of raw organic sesame and sunflower seeds. That helps to warm up progesterone. So if you're having this dysregulation, that's a super easy way for you to be able to regulate things without even having to go and buy a supplement. The other thing that I really, really, really like is fasting. Fasting can really be amazing. One of my very favorite people and very favorite books is something called is Mindy Pels, and she has a book called Fast Like a Girl. And she talks about the different ways of fasting and how you need to support your different phases of your cycle. So in her power phase, she calls it, days 1 through 10, you can fast for like 15 hours, up to 3 days if you want to go that long. And you want to eat like a lower carb, like a ketogenic diet, type of diet. And then you also do that same power phase in days 16 through 19. And the reason you're doing that is you're trying to regulate blood sugar and you're trying to support estrogen. It helps you to eat up the bad cells and kind of give yourself energy and manage the hormones. Then when you're actually having you're getting ready, you just finished ovulating, you're in the in between before you start your period, this is the manifestation. This is days 11 through 15. Then if you fast, it shouldn't be longer than 15 hours, definitely not. You want to eat things that are going to support your hormones. You don't necessarily want to do ketogenic. You can eat a little bit more carbs. Don't go hog wild. Don't eat sugar, but you want to, eat some hormone supporting foods. And then when your period starts, that's like day 20, don't fast at all. No fasting. And you're going to support progesterone through this. You're going to support your insulin and your cortisol levels. Your body's under a lot of stress. It's having to release all this. So you want to really support your cortisol levels. So the other thing that you can do too is when you are talking about supporting your hormones with seeds, as you mentioned, the other thing that we can do is seed oils. There's only one brand that really has really good seed oils. It's Andrea's Seed Oils. It's not on our website right now, but we are putting the link to that website on my website soon, a link to there. And you can support your hormones in that way. You by taking the seed oils. So again, sourcing of any kind of oil is super important because it affects our cell membrane, because our cell membrane is made up of oil. So yeah, that's a good teaser, and we can go into talk a whole lot more about it later. There's so much to be said. And I have so many awesome handouts that I love to share with my patients that I would love if you would come and find me at foundationsandwellness.com. Follow us on social media. We're on all the major platforms, and that would be amazing. There's lots to see. I think I have a couple blog articles I've written on it too. So come find us.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I know you've helped a plethora of women with hormone struggles and challenges. And so it's always a fun topic to talk about because there's so much conflicting information on the internet about what to do and how to discover if you have hormone imbalances, and which many women do these days. It's unfortunate, but it's a huge issue. And so,
And it's
yeah,
it's personal. Like it's not,
yeah,
there's not like a one size fits all. This is a personal journey. And every woman that I do the same thing for just people in general. Anybody that comes to me that wants to work with me, I look at the person sitting in front of me. And this is why some days I work 14 hours, because when I approach putting together a protocol or lifestyle recommendations, I don't have a canned approach. Do I have general things that I do? Yes, I do. But I really try to personalize everything that, because I'm listening and reflecting on the conversation we have. One person's okay with hormone replacement. The other person wants to try more natural. One person doesn't want to change the way she eats. Another person is willing to do anything I tell her. So everybody's different. So the
yeah,
approach is very personal. And how we feel about what's going on in our bodies is really personal too. Like it touches a lot of hot points in some people, So yeah, it's a journey,
it
and you don't
sure
have
is.
to go through it alone.
100%. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I know we had to make this one very short, so we'll do a deep dive on this perhaps next week. And Teresa, have a blessed afternoon. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again soon.
All right. Have a good weekend.
All
Bye-bye.
right, thanks.